समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के SIP का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का SIP टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of Geopolitics with Swasti, where our consulting editor for international and strategic affairs, Swasti Rao, takes your questions, dear subscribers, on geopolitical developments around the world. Now, as usual, Swasti, we have a lot of questions from both subscribers and non-subscribers.
Well, on that note, let me just remind all of you that while at the Geopolitics with Swasti, we prioritize subscriber questions, but we also from time to time, and especially because we want to encourage more of you to become paid subscribers to ThePrint, so that we also from time to time take non-subscriber questions. But here is an appeal for all of you to take the paid subscription of ThePrint, so that we can take more questions from you, and you can also enjoy many more perks and benefits that come with the subscription. Yes, Devdatta. So what do we have today?
So, starting today, I will begin with Karthik Parashar's question, who has a question on quantum computing. And he says that for the US, quantum computing is the next big thing. And should India then take a lesson from US and also invest in this field, since it will give them, an edge over other, or like he uses the term, enemies' digital infrastructure?
First of all, I think it's interesting to sort of delve a little bit on what exactly is quantum computing, right? Because we keep referring to it, and why is it that the government has launched a national quantum computing mission, etc. See, there is a basic difference between quantum computing and traditional computing. And if I start from here, it'll be very easy for all of you, not just Karthik, but whoever's watching the show, to understand why is it so important for us right now. See, in traditional computing, all the information goes as in binary form. It's either 0 or 1, right? That's what I'm sure you all have learned this basic thing at school. So in traditional computing, all information is binary. It's either 0 or 1. But in quantum computing, it can be 0 and 1 and simultaneously. So the bit there is called the qubit. And what happens is that when you have a situation where you can have information as both 0 and 1, and as well as, simultaneously, it allows parallel processing and at extremely high speeds. So long and short between traditional computing and quantum computing is that quantum computing allows for very, very high speed processing. And wherever you can think of an application, where you want high speed processes, that is where quantum computing becomes relevant. Okay. Right. And particularly in the military domain, just as electronic warfare is upgrading, it's developing, you can totally understand how and why high-speed processors are required, and therefore the quantum computing bit becomes so important. Right. So this is like a very, very fundamental thing, okay, of for all of you to understand the basic difference between quantum computing and traditional computing. So in theory, there have been many, many decades of research going into quantum computing. So theoretically, it's a very, very, I would say, developed field. The problem happens when you want to sort of apply it. And when you look at the application side of it, generally two problems, crop up. Of course, there are many more problems. This is not an engineering class, so I cannot really tell you all the problems. So don't even take it as something which is that extensive. But generally, two problems emerge when we are talking about the applicability of all the theoretical models of quantum computing. One is to do with cooling. What happens is that a lot of times the hardware that is required for that quantum computing, imagine that machine, right? It needs to be maintained at very low temperature, which is called, in fact, those low temperatures are called cryogenic temperatures. So you have to maintain very, very low temperatures, cryogenic temperatures throughout for that process to actually evolve the way it should. If it doesn't do it, if the cooling gets disrupted, or if there is, any discrepancy in that cooling, it would lead to error. And that error is then very difficult to control, because then one error leads to another error. So there is there's a chain of errors, and then you will not get the output that you desire. So when you want to apply this to the practical side, one thing that you need to maintain is cryogenic temperatures of that hardware. So that is one. And the second problem has always been with the difficulty to scale, which is that how do you sort of produce it at a level which is, like mass produce it, etc. Because then there are so many problems and, it ended therein. So, and as far as the solutions is concerned, of course, people are working on the solutions also, and US has certainly the edge. There is no doubt about it. And even in India, we are working a lot on it because, like I said, that it's really very important to, I would say, high speed processes wherever they are required. So naturally, and in India, what has happened is that in 2023, we launched the National Quantum Mission. The National Quantum Mission, the money is pretty impressive. It's about, 6 to 7,000 crore worth of rupees have been sort of allocated for it, and that's the budget. And if you see the details, this particular mission has a very, I would say, ambitious programs. And one of this, I kind of, took it down from the website only. So this says that mission implementation, when the quantum mission implementation actually includes setting up of 4 thematic hubs, or these are called the T hubs,
Right.
in top academic and national R&D institutions in this particular domain. And these domains would cover the quantum computing, quantum communication, quantum sensing and metrology, and quantum materials and devices. But National Quantum Mission is just one aspect. Then DRDO is also working on the same because, I just told you in the beginning that these technologies are essential for developing our defense, capabilities as well. So DRDO is working on what is known as quantum communication and cryptography, and the DRDO is working on entanglement breakthrough. Now, entanglement breakthrough is interesting because if you remember when I started out with the explanation, I said that you have to maintain very, very low temperatures and the cryogenic temperatures, right? Because if you don't maintain those temperatures, entanglement happens, and that is what leads to the error, okay? So when you have an entanglement breakthrough, which means that you are able to break through of those errors, okay? In very, very simple terms. So this is by and large, what India is doing. Now, in terms of its applications, of course, it has massive applications in electronic warfare, as you know from the outset, that wherever you need, computing speeds to be accelerated. I mean, obviously, you cannot really do away without quantum computing. So India has taken some baby steps. I mentioned a few. US remains the world leader in it, but recently IIT Delhi also sort of, showed some capabilities on jam proofing, communication, etc. So, I mean, it is an evolving thing. We need to keep a tab on it. It requires very high, I would say, skill that India has, and that is the purpose of those T hubs, etc. And very soon we should be seeing some results as well, because yes, as you can see, the nation is very serious about developing more and more quantum computing capabilities.
Swasti, following that up with another question that Karthik Parashar has. Karthik has a center host of questions, but among them, he also asks that should India invest heavily in air defense till we get our AMCA, or should we instead get some 5th gen fighter jet as a stopgap arrangement?
India should develop its own fighter jet. There is no doubt about it because, if you look at the entire scenario right now, even if you were to place orders, forget choosing. Even if we were to choose one and place orders, we will not get the deliveries before many, many years. That's the nature of things. That's how, that's so much backlog there is for them to clear. So that India should be investing in AMCAs. Yes, India should be investing in AMCAs. And in fact, if I take the, at least the statements on face value by the DRDO chief, he keeps repeating that the AMCA will have its first flight towards the end of 2028, etc. I mean, I would take it with a pinch of salt because, there's a reason why we have not been able to deliver, whether it's HAL, whether it's DRDO. They've not been able to deliver on their deadlines. But at the same time, a lot of changes have also happened. If you may be noticing that Ministry of Defense is sort of fast tracking a lot of things so that this particular time can be cut down. So we will see what happens in terms of whether India should. Yes, India should. But at the same time, I think everybody realizes that time is not on our side, and if there is some minimum import that we need to do, we should go ahead and do it. In fact, one of the things that has happened post Operation Sindoor, especially for the Air Force, is that if you've been noticing that earlier all the procurements that would take so many months, those files are getting cleared in few days, and that's a very interesting change to notice, which is that at least everybody is mindful of just how we have to keep time as a vector in our calculation of all these procurements. So I totally agree. AMCA should be developed. It will take us time, but it's worth it, because once we have the capability, then we can scale production whenever we want. We can also deploy any kinds of missiles we require. There would be no problem with the source code. So recently there was news on why the Dassault Aviation had refused to share the source code. And in the absence of a source code, what happens is that you cannot put your own missiles or your radars, because then it's not compatible. You need the source code for it. But at the same time, we must keep in mind that whether or not the source code will be shared is going to be determined by what kind of an agreement did we sign. So if it is a part of the agreement or not. So what I'm trying to say is that if we try and develop our own, obviously nothing like it, because then we are the controllers of what really goes on it, what missiles are put on it, how and when we upgrade it, etc. That's one part. But the second part is that it's not just about fifth generation alone. It's not just about a fighter problem alone. Please understand that modern warfare is not got to do with dogfight anymore. I have so many times on GPS I have explained this. Modern warfare, especially aerial warfare, is got to do with BVR capabilities, which is beyond visual range capabilities. We have to invest simultaneously in more BVR capabilities. We, of course, have a whole range of BVR missiles, Astra, Mark 1, Mark 2, DRDO has many versions of it. So, of course, that's one part. Those are indigenously built. Of course, we have Meteors and we have used them also in Operation Sindoor. So, it's about investing in the BVR missiles. It's also about investing in upgrading and building more capabilities of our electronic warfare. Okay, how do you link your fighter jets and the BVR missiles, etc., and extend their ranges by connecting them with the right operational data links to the AWACS, which is airborne early warning systems, because that is the future of aerial warfare. It is not just about getting a very potent fighter. It is also about creating a whole host of ecosystem around it, so that you are able to extend the ranges of your BVR kills, launches, and suppress the ranges of your enemy's BVR kills. Okay, that is the whole game, and it is not just about a fighter. It's a fighter plus your like I just mentioned about the BVR capabilities and your electronic warfare, and getting the right operational data links, and getting updating your threat library. By the way, there's something that I'm sure the Air Force buffs out there would know, but the threat library is basically, each fighter, based on their missions, etc., they keep upgrading their threat library in terms of what really do they need to be watchful of, okay? And that really goes a long way into the aircraft sort of taking a decision, or the fighter pilot taking a decision on how to respond to it. So basically, you need to keep upgrading that. So there is a whole host of things. It's not just this. So I agree that we have to take a holistic picture of what we need to do. It is not a simple debate on indigenization versus import. Okay, it is not a simplistic debate. I know social media makes it look very, very simple, but it's not a simplistic thing. It's about interoperability. And I'm of the opinion, Devdatta, that let multi-alignment remain a political tool. Okay, let it be a politically correct stance to take, that we multi-align when you're friends with everybody. When you try to have the same philosophy in your defense ecosystem, I mean, I'm not sure it is going to work, because it is not just about equipment. It is also about a very advanced, computer-based and technologically advanced integrated system, where you don't only have to ensure that this is interoperable, but you also have to make it interoperable in a way so that their performance is optimized. Okay, and optimized in proportion to how technology is advancing, which includes the updation of the threat library. I mean, have we updated the threat library for our fighters? Do we have the most efficient ODLs, the operational data links? Are we investing enough, not just in the fighters, but also in the BVRs and the AWACS, etc.? That is the entire picture. Okay, so let's not just make it very simplistic. And that was a great question, because it kind of gave me the space to get into the details.
Right. So Swasti, that was the first in the set of questions that we have received on Op Sindoor, and we have received a host of questions. And following up on Karthik's question, there's a question by a subscriber Ajinkya, who says that the recent Operation Rising Lion underscored the need for SEAD and DIAD, and yet in sending our assets without establishing air superiority seems like bad planning. So he asks that, do you think in the future, when our forces need to bomb airfields, radars, air defense first before sending planes in air, or maybe do not need to do it at all, he is assertive in asking that, do you think it would be stupid to assume that the enemy would not treat this as a war, and that this war then can be fought with just one hand behind the back.
Now, it's a good question. I know where this is coming from. But at the same time, let me just at the outset establish that there are two parts of this question. One is the political part of this question
Right.
that I'll come to later, and there is a technical part of this question. Let's take the technical part first because it's more objective. Now, in today's modern air warfare or any military conflict, if you are thinking of launching an air operation, etc., the SOP is to actually have a SEAD and a DEAD mission, which is that suppression of enemy air defenses or destruction of enemy air defenses. And this has been proved by decades, because otherwise you will always be at the risk of being taken down by, say, surface to air kind of a missile or javelin, stingers, etc., etc. So this has been proven. And during Operation Rising Lion, we saw that Israel achieved full air superiority over Iranian skies, and that was instrumental in the kind of damage they were able to perpetrate on Iranians and all the precision strikes that they did, and it's been kind of proven again. In fact, I can give you an example of a situation where, or a war situation where SEAD and DEAD were not used, and that has actually led to catastrophic results. And this is on the Russia-Ukraine war, because Russia-Ukraine war, Russia has an overwhelming air power, okay, but even then, when they entered Ukraine, when the war had just begun, which is 22nd of February 2022, when the war had just begun, Russia, for some reason, was unable to achieve air superiority. They did not carry out the SEAD and DEAD, missions, which is a combination of factors. I'll tell you what it is. And as a result, you can see that because of that one fundamental mistake, that Russia was not able to achieve air superiority, and the Ukrainians were taking them down using javelins and stingers and everything. The war is running into its fourth year. Obviously, a lot has changed also, so it wouldn't be correct to say that Russia has not course corrected, etc. But that initial setback and this initial puzzle of why would an air power, and an air power as formidable as Russia, would enter into Ukrainian territory without even performing the basics of modern air warfare. And then you have a whole host of explanations about, well, they did it because perhaps they were taking Ukrainians too lightly, because they did not have the right intelligence, because they did not know how prepared the Ukrainians were, etc., etc. But this is like a great example of what happens when you enter into enemy skies without really first ensuring air superiority, which is carried out by SEAD and DEAD missions. Okay. Now, this is the technical part. What we saw in the case of India during Operation Sindoor, which of course later on has been alluded to by various spokesperson right from different, I think the latest has been our defense attaché in Indonesia, right, who said the same thing. Now, what happened in the case of India, that we did not look into achieving air superiority through SEAD and DEAD, because we wanted this to remain a non-escalatory thing. And that's where the political part of it comes, which is that it was a political decision that we don't want to send an escalatory signal. Therefore, we will not establish air superiority through SEAD and DEAD. We don't need to do that. We will just go and target the enemy territory and the terrorist infrastructure out there, and we will come back. Now, that had led to a politically incorrect outcome, which is that it also landed in us the loss of our jets, etc. Now, that's a different thing, and everybody in India is so touchy about it. So what we will do is that we will let it come out from the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Defense spokespersons themselves, as whenever they want to bring that out. But it is true that what that guy was saying, what Captain Kumar was saying in Indonesia, was simply reiterating what has been sort of mentioned by so many people by now, okay? That, yes, we did not do that. Had we done it, probably, the Operation Sindoor would have unfolded in a different way. But he was just telling the operational detail, that what part of it was political decision and what part of it was a technical side. Now, it is true that no professional air force in the world would try to enter into enemy skies without carrying out the SEAD and DEAD. And in fact, we already have a big example in front of us by way of the Russia-Ukraine war. There is a lot of work that has gone into why Russia was not able to achieve air superiority and what it led to. So, can you argue that our policymakers were not studying that enough, or did the Air Force not suggest them? the fact that we have to do this, I'm not privy to that. Actually, nobody knows. But what we now know is that this part was political decision, and this part was what the Air Force then did. And just so to your question, should we have carried out the SEAD and TEAD? I think, of course, I totally agree with your fact that, I mean, it was some kind of we wanted to be non-escalatory, but the Pakistanis wanted to up the ante, and they retaliated. So, I mean, in hindsight, everything looks very simple, but in that very moment, I think it takes on a very different sanctity. So therefore, that's my opinion. And from a technical perspective, I think no such mission should be carried out without SEAD and TEAD. And I'm sure the lessons that are worth taking or worth learning have already been learned. And very quickly, just in terms of what SEAD and TEAD is, because a lot of times we're using these terms in a very, I would say, sweeping manner. SEAD and TEAD is basically a combination of both kinetic and electronic warfare methods. Kinetic methods mean that you can use anti-radiation missiles like the ARMs, and now the US has a very advanced version of that ARM, etc. So you could use precision guided munitions. You, of course, ARMs I already told you about. You could also destroy the command and control centers of your enemy's radars, etc. And you can use your aircraft to carry out these missions as well. In terms of electronic warfare, you could use jamming, and that's what I'm saying, that you need to up your quantum computing game in order to get these capabilities. So you could do jamming, you could do spoofing, you could do deception, you could do a whole host of things. So generally, what is referred to as SEAD and TEAD is a combination of EW and kinetic methods, by which the end objective is that you want to achieve air superiority.
Well, with that, Swasti, you also have answered Ajinkya's second question, which was, what do you make of the remarks of Captain Shiv Kumar Sharma? Moving ahead from that, Swasti, Ravi Rules has this question on what are India's plans for SBS III, which is the space-based surveillance program, and he asks that how do you think this will augment the capability of our forces during times of conflict and no conflict, and say, for example, how would these satellites have helped us during Op Sindoor?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think first I just need to tell you some basics without getting into sort of, big names and big terms. See, it's simple. India has missed the bus when it comes to investing in satellite. Okay. While we have gone to the moon, we have gone to the Mars, etc., we have done all that. We have launched a Gaganyaan, all full marks to it. But frankly, somewhere we sort of misread the situation that our arch rival China has more than 1,000 satellites. They have their own navigation system. Okay. They have a spy balloon. They have capabilities, because see, usually what happens with a satellite is that it is dependent on Earth's rotation. So in order to get a consistent picture, you have to develop more capabilities. Just having satellites won't do. And China has those capabilities. So we had a situation where the arch rival is investing so much in satellites. There are 1,000 known satellites, of course, spy satellites, etc. While we, on the other hand, we did not really invest in that. And one of the key takeaways of Operation Sindoor is that yes, we should have. In fact, as latest as the Deputy Chief of Army Staff, General Singh, when he recently was speaking at an event, he also alluded to the fact that China was giving real-time satellite imagery to Pakistan, and a lot of images, etc. Actually, now we have more know-how on how China was clicking pictures of Pahalgam, satellite images of Pahalgam, high-resolution pictures of Pahalgam, etc. So long and short is that yes, we have taken a decision to now launch about 52 odd satellites. We have just started. We have a long way to go. But yes, in my opinion, I think India's satellite-based program should be given a fillip, because that's one important key takeaway from Operation Sindoor. And I'm just trying to be brief because I also took it up in other episodes of the GPS. So you can go and watch them there. They explain that.
Right. Swasti, moving on from defense to diplomacy, a lot of our subscribers have questions on global diplomacy, specifically Indian diplomacy, and even then I would like to lead with a non-subscriber question, and this is from Ashish Dev Singh, who has asked that do you think China and Pakistan are coming together to create a new regional bloc to replace SAARC? And following up on that, Anubhav Saxena has a question where he asks that do you think that Indian diplomacy has become rude and hard-nosed because of Jaishankar's statements and Piyush Goyal calling Asian nations silly to trade with? Following up on that, even Satya Pragyan Das, another of our subscribers, has a very pointed question where he says that do you think this is making India isolated in global diplomacy circles?
Let's just start with SAARC first. So,
Right.
as you know, SAARC was this group of South Asian countries and the regional integration of those countries. And despite having like a permanent secretariat and all, like it's a permanent organization, so it has all formal or organs, etc. It has not worked. So, I think the last SAARC summit happened 10 years ago,
Right.
because of course you know that this is coming in the wake of the 2016 attacks, etc. So, what I'm saying is that India-Pakistan conflict is at the heart of why SAARC has not been able to take off. And if I tell you thematically speaking, I can, one could argue that actually South Asia or Southern Asia, नाम बदलने से कुछ नहीं होता, काम सही होना चाहिए. So South Asia / Southern Asia, whichever way you choose to call it, remains the least integrated regions in the world. Okay, the least integrated neighborhoods in the world. And the reason being is that South Asia as a project is an unfinished project of British colonialism and imperialism, because the British left us with all these unsettled borders, right? So India has an unsettled border with Pakistan, Pakistan has an unsettled border with Afghanistan, okay, India has an unsettled border with China, etc. And then of course Bangladesh was born later. So continentally speaking, there are so many problems. Also geopolitically speaking, China and India, sort of compete for influence of the, in the region. China thinks of a unipolar Asia and Indo-Pacific. India thinks of a multipolar Asia and Indo-Pacific. China encircles India. China comes with deep pockets. We have fought so many wars, and China is sort of ramping up pressure on our choke points. I did an entire worldview on this recently, on why we need to revisit 8 years since Doklam and what really is China doing there. How is it really, messing up our relations with Bhutan and our posture there? With what it is doing in Pakistan, we all know in terms of Operation Sindoor, etc. So how things have changed in Bangladesh, we all know. So by and large, what I wish to iterate here is that South Asia is a fractured project of British colonialism and imperialism, and it continues to remain like that. South Asians, there have been a lot of cultural elaborations of how South Asia has a common culture, etc, etc. ये सब दिल को खुश रखने की बातें हैं. Fact of the matter is very different, which is that the SAARC countries remain the least integrated regions, neighborhoods in the world. Now, in that light, when I hear something like this, that China is trying to float a SAARC -1, and here the -1 is us. Actually, to my mind, it makes a lot of geopolitical sense from China's perspective, and something we need to worry about. Now, why I say so is that in South Asia, with an exception of Bhutan, every single of our neighbor has signed up for the BRI. Okay, every single one of our neighbors. So whether it's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives, you name it, all of them, Sri Lanka, all of them have signed up for the BRI. And if by what they say, if now we know the kind of three-front destabilization that perhaps we are facing, from China, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Just I think it was a few days ago that some news came about how Pakistan, China, and Bangladesh have formally met. Okay, in order
trilateral summit.
in a trilateral framework. Now, if that has already happened, but just weeks before this development came another one, which was China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. They also met in a trilateral framework and in a formal way, where they talked about how to connect Afghanistan to CPEC.
Yes.
Right, to Gwadar. And whereas we want to reduce Afghanistan's dependence on Karachi, and we want to connect it to Chabahar and Bandar Abbas, because that's where INSTC is. So what I'm trying to say is that with all these nimble trilaterals that China is floating around us, with the fact that except for Bhutan, all countries around us are already signatories to BRI, from China's perspective, it makes sense to push this narrative, an anti-India narrative, that okay, the problem is India, right? So if you take India out, the rest of the countries can collaborate easily, right? There is no problem per se, because look at them, they're already collaborating, they're already talking. And if I read the Chinese mind correctly, I am of the opinion that whenever that happens, if this happens, they will not make it look like an close to India program. They will say, oh, you are welcome to join. Okay, so let's see. Nothing more formal has come about it, but one wouldn't be surprised, because I just told you that this is where things are going. And yes, the neighborhood, we are getting isolated in our neighborhood. We are trying, but then we are getting isolated in our neighborhood. I mean, I have done so much on India's neighborhood policy, and why is it that the neighbors don't like us, and what is it that we can get right? But there is the same neighbors. They are okay with China being the big brother, but they're not okay with India being the big brother. Right. So the reasons are very complex and psychological, but that is how it is. So what do you do to counter that? So if you want to counter that, India has to focus on its own capabilities. India has to avoid a conflict and a war. Okay, and then perhaps also make these countries realize that it is in their interest to also keep their relations diversified, which India is doing. Frankly, I think we should also be mindful of the fact, and I don't agree with a lot of very harsh things that you said about Indian diplomacy here. India is trying, but the problem is that none of this works till the time we have our, domestic capabilities in place. So it's very easy to say that China plus one diversification is in India's interests. Theoretically, it is. But analytically speaking, and data tells us that the investments that didn't go to China because of de-risking from China, etc., narrative, they didn't land in India. They landed in Vietnam, they landed in Singapore. So all of this, all these dots are connected. Till the time we really reform our domestic sector, our defense ecosystem, our economic general investment ecosystem generally, we obviously will not be able to make use of these shifts. Okay, so one Apple story will come. Another story will come, but this will not be able to connect the dots in a way so that we are able to be a convincing, so to say, diversification choice for these neighbors who seem to be very, like I said, that who seem to be, even though they have been at the receiving end of the debt trap diplomacy, etc. Like in Sri Lanka is a great example. But you see that while the government in Sri Lanka is trying to be cozy up to India, but at the same time, they are very much eager to get more investments from China. And this is after their financial crisis. Okay.
Right.
So this is the reality and we better be prepared for it.
Swasti, moving on, Tanusu has a question on South Korea, and she asks that Lee Jae-myung, who is the new president of South Korea, seems to have a China tilt. Now, with Trump's tendency to bully his allies, do you see a shift in South Korea, China and South Korea US ties? And if at all, will this affect India?
That's a great question, and I really like Tanusu's question because Tanusu is perhaps the only female subscriber that we
Precisely.
have. And I remember that once when we were making an appeal, and she said that she's actually a female, and that was something that I really liked. And it's not just about her being a female; it's also about her always asking extremely intelligent questions. So I really like that and keep that up. Now on South Korea, South Korea, as you know, just like any other Korean drama, if you know what Korean dramas are, so they're very, very dramatic politics as well. Okay, extremely dramatic politics. Okay, वहाँ कोई impeachment के नीचे मानता ही नहीं है. Okay, so impeachment is the order of the day. In fact, the earlier president actually got impeached, and this entire political drama that had started unfolding after December last year finally culminated into the election of Lee Jae-myung, who's now from the Democratic Party and who's now become the president on 3rd of June 2025, and with a very high percentage of vote share also, with almost 50% of vote share. A little less, I think 49.5 or something, but very high. And this has been also quite remarkable because usually you don't really get such high vote percentage. So that's that. Now, very quickly, in terms of his posturing, I know why you asked this question, because you know what he said? He said that his predecessor, he was way too antagonistic to China and way too friendly with Japan. And he doesn't really believe in that. So he says that no, Japan is also, so while China is a problem, of course, because China's, so to say, endorsement of North Korea and the Krink axis, etc. And I'll get into the details. But Japan also, they have issues, they have issues of the comfort women. Please remember, Japan and Korea don't get along well. Japan and Korea also have an island dispute. It's called the Takeshima Island dispute, okay? So not everything is hunky-dory just because they are all allies to the US, okay? There is a lot of problem there. Now, that's one part. So I know where your question is coming from because he said these statements, he gave these statements. But at the same time, remember that he's always called himself a pragmatist. Okay, and as a pragmatist, I expect him to take a lot of pragmatic stands on a lot of things. And if you ask me, I think there would be 4-5 factors which are going to determine how his presidency is going to pan out. Okay, so the first factor is going to be about how is he going to exercise his power. Is he going to again utilize this opportunity to go after his rivals, which has been pretty much a thing in South Korean politics? Okay, is he going to be utilizing, the mandate to really make a difference? Okay, so how is he exercising the power is something which is important because last time we saw it getting very petty and personal. So is he going to fall into the same line, or is he going to really think of what is good for the country? That's one. The second is that I will see that he's going to boost a lot of social welfare. Okay, social welfare remains a very important aspect of South Korean politics. Remember, South Korea is also among the OECD countries. It has the worst, the lowest fertility rate and all that. Okay, it has unemployment issues, etc. So how that is managed is also going to determine how his presidency unfolds. Similarly, and he has to maintain a balance. So on the one hand, he has to implement social welfare schemes, and on the other hand, he has to maintain a balance with being big business friendly also. Okay, because that's where the money comes from. And by the way, in South Korean politics, social welfare is something that both the right and the left actually
on.
support, because it's very popular, okay, among the population. So those kind of things will be important. And how he responds to the security threats is something which is also important, and which should take I should take 2 minutes just to elaborate on it. So South Korea today has omnidirectional security problems, right? So the security problem, like I said, there's a Takeshima dispute with Japan. Although there is no war, but there is a dispute, okay, and it still goes on. The other is about North Korea, and North Korea's growing nuclear arsenal, North Korea's growing battle expertise that they are now getting in Ukraine, okay, because North Korea has sent many thousands of troops to fight on the side of Russia in Ukraine. So that, and then North Korea's and Russia's bonhomie, that they get very uncomfortable about, and that's why they want to maintain ties with everyone. So that collaboration, how battle tested they are becoming, how battle hardened they are getting, that is a problem for South Koreans. Okay, so that's one. Japan, I already told you. Then the third problem they have is about the growing bonhomie between China and Russia, because there is a factor that is not discussed much, is that even in India, I would say one of the things that we misread because of our friendly ties with Russia is that we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of how the Chinese and the Russian alliance is actually getting formed, not just in Europe or not just in other theaters, in Indo-Pacific. I'll just give an example because you're mentioning South Korea and I noted it down. So that Russia-China in November of last year, 2024, okay, Russia-China joint exercises, I mean, they were doing joint, aerial, exercises. They actually intruded the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone, which is called as KADIS, okay? And the Korean jets, the Korean Air Force jets, the Republic of Korea, those jets, they scrambled. So it has happened, and this is a problem of how to sort of take care of it. And that is one of the reasons when he says that it is not a change towards China, it is about managing it better. Because unlike his predecessor, that was way too antagonistic towards China and way too friendly on Japan because of a variety of reasons, because Biden administration was really trying to up this narrative of the Western solidarity and unity for Ukraine, etc., etc. But now there is a radically different precedent in the United States. And finally, the fourth point, so that is also going to be important. And there's one interesting thing that you should know, and I think a lot of audiences should know. When you think about the Taiwan Straits, right, you should know that he has also made very controversial statements on the Taiwan Strait issue also. He says that if China is taking Taiwan by force, or if there is a war in that region, how does it affect us? Which is actually true, because see, if you look at where China and Taiwan are located, right? Like I said, Japan has island disputes with 3 neighbors. Japan has island disputes with Korea. Japan has Takeshima Islands. It has also island dispute with Russia. It's called the Kuril Islands. And with China, they have island disputes in Senkaku. But if you look at the map, you'll see that Senkaku is placed between Senkaku is placed between China and Japan, and it's very close to Taiwan. So based on the claim, if you take the Japanese claim, which is inclusive of Senkaku, it goes very, very close to Taiwan. And if you take the Chinese claim, which is also very close to Senkaku, it is more towards the east Japan Sea. So you can look at the map. Now what happens is that in case there is a war in the Taiwan Straits, Japan is bound to get automatically involved because of its position on Senkaku Islands.
Right.
Okay, but the same logic doesn't apply to Korea, which is further up north. So Korea is now saying, hame kya lena dena bhai? Okay, even if tomorrow there's a war, Japan needs to worry, no, because you have claims there. We are on a different side, so we don't need to worry. Our worry is North Korea. Our worry is the growing, so to say, bonhomie in waters that are close to us and in our air, identification zone. So we have a different set of problems, okay? You have a different set of problems. So why do we need to antagonize China so much? So that is the source of where this is coming from. And unless you really understand the geography of that region, you will not be able able to understand, and it will probably appear as if there is a fundamental shift or something. In my opinion, it is not a fundamental shift. It is about being more pragmatic, because the fifth point about, like I said, that there would be some factors that are going to determine his presidency, and the fifth factor is on Trump, because unlike the previous, his predecessor, of course, there was also Joe Biden. He had a very different view, but on Trump, he has actually said that the way Trump is doing his politics, he's actually just doing the law of jungle. He's perpetrating a law of jungle, because high tariffs on a lot of South Korean exports, cars, steels, etc., that's a problem for them. Americans are also now asking them for money, so that in lieu of the American troops stationed there. So what I'm saying is a classic Donald Trump, and he has said that my priority is to manage this also. And how do you manage a very unwieldy, unpredictable Trump on the one hand, a growing and assertive China on the other hand, China-Russia bonhomie on the other hand, North Korea factor? How do you manage all this? You have to manage this only through pragmatism, and that's why he calls himself a pragmatist. So in my opinion, not a shift, but I would say he would be more temperate.
Also, never an episode without Trump. Before we end this episode, Swasti, one last question, and this is from Karthik Parashar again, who asks, what power does Rwanda hold in Africa?
So as far as Rwanda is concerned, I think this is also coming from the fact that Donald Trump recently claimed that he brokered a peace between DRC, which is Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda. And because of that, he demanded a Nobel, and he said that nobody's going to give me a Nobel, but I deserve one, etc. So anyway, so that's one. So Rwanda is a mineral-rich country. It's in the, it's for many years it has been in news for all the wrong reasons, because of the 1994 genocide between Rwanda, and Burundi, between, the ethnic cleansing, etc. But very quickly between DRC and Rwanda, although the roots of the conflict go very deep and they go all the way back to the 1994 genocide, but by and large they've been managed. And I don't have the time to actually get into the details of how many times peace has been brokered, etc., and what have been the evolving arrangements in the region. But very quickly, Rwanda is important for many. Rwanda also contributes a lot to the UN peacekeeping missions. Okay, right. So in that sense also it's an important country. As far as this particular conflict is concerned, this erupted in 2022 when the Rwandan forces, they entered DRC to provide support and military support to what is known as the M23 rebel group. M23 rebel group is the March 23 movement. I don't have the time to go into the details, but basically when the Rwandan forces entered, Congo to support a part of their protesters, okay, and that is what led to all this problem. Now, and this is where Trump has said that we have now brokered a peace, okay. Now, the interesting bit of the piece is that what they have done is that they have made the two sides sign on a minerals agreement, okay, saying that if you guys collaborate on minerals, you have collaboration on that mineral production, etc., refinement, export, etc., then you will have no incentive to fight, and this will be a win-win. Because if Donald Trump has an obsession with minerals, he's recently signed a minerals deals in Ukraine. Nothing is happening there. Russia is bombing Ukraine left, right, and center. Ukraine is also perpetrating as many drone attacks on Russia. So nothing has happened. But that's just to tell you that Donald Trump has a penchant for minerals deals and etc. So he has finalized and formalized a minerals deal with Ukraine. And similarly, he put on the table what is known as the critical minerals for security and peace deal. And the logic was that if you trade with each other and if you sort of collaborate on critical minerals, then you will not fight. Now, this is very shallow because frankly, when the violence broke out between these two sides in 2022, Rwanda was already the biggest trading partner to Congo. So this neoliberal logic that countries that trade with each other do not go to war with each other, that's not how it works. Russia and Europe had the biggest ever partnership on energy when Russia attacked Ukraine. This doesn't really hold, okay? But nonetheless, this is Donald Trump's approach. Now very quickly, it is true that Rwanda is actually has a lot of very important rare earths, and from India's perspective as well, that could be one of the main reasons why we should be interested in Rwanda. We are also engaging with Africa, I mean, in a big way. It's not only the African Union on the whole that we engage with. African Union has 54 countries. It was under India's G20 presidency that the entire African Union became a member of G20. But also, we also sort of, engage with the other regional arrangements inside Africa, because Africa is so huge that African Union is like this one pan-African thing. But then you also have small little communities and regional arrangements. So India does that. India also collaborates with the UN peacekeeping missions, etc. And rare earth is going to be the next big thing. So that's the importance of Rwanda. Yes, it is. It is going to be important. And one thing that I'd like to highlight before I finish this elaboration is that actually European Union is doing a lot of work in the production and extraction of rare earth from Rwanda. And this is good news for us because, like I keep saying, that even if we want to engage a country for critical rare earth, it is better to always join hands with somebody that is already there, because these are very cost intensive processes, and then we alone probably will not be able to do it. And what we need to do is that we need to build collaborative frameworks and ensure that there is resilience of supply chain so that India can enter into triangular cooperation. So in my opinion, European Union doing so much work there and looked upon as a stable enough factor should be a plus for India, because India European Union also have good ties, and we are looking at engagement under the triangular cooperation, which is different from trilateral. Trilateral only means 3 countries coming together, and triangular means 2 countries coming together to carry out a developmental mission in a third country. So we already have these mechanisms with countries like France, Germany, Italy, also with the UAE, by the way, in a different part of the world. But this is what I can tell you about Rwanda from Indians' perspective.
Right. And with that, Swasti, we come to an end of this episode. It has been an extremely insightful conversation, and we look forward to your questions, dear subscribers, for our episode next week.